Hey there, money-minded folks. It's Jim Cramer here, and we got to talk about the Fed's latest move. Just the other day, they decided to cut interest rates again. This time, it's a quarter-point drop. That means the target range for the federal funds rate is now sitting at 4.5% to 4.75%. You might be thinking, Jim, what does this even mean for my wallet? Well, buckle up, because we're diving into the nitty-gritty of this rate cut and how it affects you. This rate cut is a big deal, even if it seems small. It's the second cut in recent months, and it shows that the Fed is serious about keeping our economy humming along. The Fed's job is like a balancing act. They want to keep things stable, but they also want to encourage growth. Don't worry, we'll break down exactly what this means for you in the sections to come. Now, you might be thinking, Jim, this is all well and good, but why should I care about a measly quarter-point rate cut? Well, my friend, this stuff has a ripple effect throughout the entire economy. It's like when you throw a pebble into a pond and the ripples spread out. This rate cut is the pebble, and those ripples, they're going to reach your wallet, your investments, and even your job. Think about mortgages, car loans, credit cards, all that fun stuff. When the Fed cuts rates, banks usually charge less interest on loans. Good news if you're buying a house or a new car, but lower rates mean lower returns on savings. Investors watch the Fed because it affects stock prices. Rate cuts can make it cheaper for companies to borrow and grow. The Fed's rate cut isn't just abstract news, it has real-world implications for your money, your job, and the economy. All right, let's try to decipher what the Fed is really saying with this rate cut. You see, they don't just come right out and say, hey, the economy is looking a little shaky, so we're slashing rates. Nope, they use this whole special language that can sound like gibberish to the average Joe. But don't worry, I'm here to translate. One of the key phrases the Fed is using right now is gradual approach. What they're trying to say is that they're not going to make any sudden, drastic moves. They're going to take things slow and steady, and they'll be watching the economic data like hawks. Another thing the Fed keeps mentioning is inflation. Now, inflation is a fancy word for prices going up. The Fed's goal is to keep inflation under control, not too high, not too low, but just right. The Fed is also keeping a close eye on the labor market. That's just a fancy way of saying jobs. So, while the Fed might sound like they're speaking in code sometimes, they're really just trying to send signals about the economy. Now, it's important to remember that the Fed isn't just going to keep cutting rates forever. They're taking a gradual approach, which means they're going to see how the economy reacts to this rate cut before they make any more moves. Think of it like baking a cake. You wouldn't keep adding ingredients without checking to see if the batter is right, would you? The Fed is doing the same thing with the economy. They're adding a little bit of stimulus with this rate cut, and now they're going to step back and observe. They want to see if businesses start borrowing more, if consumers start spending more, and if the job market starts to pick up. If things are moving in the right direction, they might hold off on cutting rates again for a while. But if the economy doesn't respond the way they hoped, the Fed might decide to cut rates again in the future. This gradual approach is designed to prevent the economy from going on a wild roller coaster ride. All right, homeowners and aspiring buyers, listen up. This rate cut could be music to your ears, especially if you're thinking about mortgages. See, when the Fed cuts rates, mortgage rates tend to follow suit. Now, I'm not saying you're going to see a dramatic drop in mortgage rates overnight. It doesn't usually work that way, but even a small decrease could save you a bundle over the life of your loan. If you've been sitting on the fence about buying a home, this rate cut could be the push you need to take the plunge. Lower mortgage rates make it more affordable to finance a home purchase, which could put your dream home within reach. And if you're already a homeowner, this could be a prime opportunity to refinance your existing mortgage and snag a lower interest rate. Now let's talk about those of you itching to get behind the wheel of a shiny new car. This rate cut could be just the excuse you need to trade in that old clunker. Just like with mortgages, car loans usually get a little cheaper when the Fed cuts rates. But hold your horses, speed racer. Don't go rushing into a dealership just yet. Make sure you can comfortably afford the monthly payments, even if they are a little lower now. The key here is to be smart about it. If you're in a good financial position and you've been planning to buy a car anyway, then this rate cut could be a nice bonus. But if you're stretching your budget thin, it might be wise to hold off for a bit longer. Let's face it, folks. Credit cards can be a double-edged sword. They're convenient, but they can also come with sky-high interest rates that can bury you in debt faster than you can say balance transfer. Now, the good news is that this rate cut might bring a little bit of relief from those high interest charges. When the Fed lowers rates, credit card companies sometimes, not always, but sometimes follow suit and adjust their rates accordingly. But here's the catch. Credit card companies are notorious for finding sneaky ways to make up for lost revenue. So while they might lower your interest rate slightly, they might also raise your annual fee or make it harder to earn rewards points. The bottom line is this: don't let this rate cut lull you into a false sense of security. It's still crucial to be responsible with your credit cards. Hey, all you entrepreneurs and small business owners out there, this rate cut isn't just about mortgages and car loans, it's also about you. See, when the Fed lowers interest rates, it becomes cheaper for businesses to borrow money too. And that's a big deal because it can fuel economic growth. When businesses have access to affordable credit, they can invest in expansion, hire more employees, and buy new equipment. All of that activity creates jobs, boosts wages, and stimulates the economy. Lower interest payments mean more cash flow, which could make the difference between staying afloat during tough times and having to close up shop. Now here's the thing about interest rates. They don't exist in a vacuum. When the Fed makes a move, it creates a ripple effect that spreads throughout the entire economy. Lower borrowing costs don't just affect people who are actively taking out loans, they also impact consumer confidence and spending habits. When people feel like they can borrow money more easily, they tend to be more optimistic about the future and more likely to open their wallets. This increase in consumer spending can be a boon for businesses, leading to higher sales and profits. And when businesses are doing well, they're more likely to hire more workers, invest in growth, and contribute to a virtuous cycle of economic expansion. All right, folks, let's talk about that rainy day fund. You know, the money you've stashed away in your trusty savings account, earning a little interest while you sleep. Well, here's the thing about rate cuts. They can put a dent in those interest earnings. When the Fed lowers rates, banks tend to follow suit and reduce the interest they pay on savings accounts. But hey, here's the silver lining. Even though savings account rates might be lower, they're still relatively safe. So it's still a good idea to have some cash set aside for emergencies, even if it's not earning as much interest as it used to. Section 2, CDs, safety net or money trap. Let's talk about certificates of deposit, or CDs. CDs offer a fixed interest rate for a set period. You can't withdraw your money early without a penalty. When interest rates fall, CDs can be tricky. Lock in a high rate before cuts and you're golden. But if rates rise, you'll regret a low-rate CD. CDs can be a safe option for short-term parking. Section 3, bonds, the fixed income conundrum. Let's delve into the world of bonds. Bonds are more complex than savings accounts and CDs. Think of bonds like IOUs issued by governments or corporations. You're lending money to the issuer and they promise to pay you back with interest. In a falling rate environment, bond prices go up. Investors pay a premium for higher interest rates. If rates fall, your bond portfolio value might increase, but selling before maturity might not get you the premium you hoped for. If rates rise, bond values could decline. It's a balancing act. Bonds can add income and stability to a diversified portfolio. Section 4, stock market riding the rate cut wave. Now let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, the stock market. The stock market is like a roller coaster full of ups and downs, twists and turns. And guess what? Rate cuts can have a big impact on the direction of that roller coaster. See, when the Fed cuts rates, it usually gives the stock market a boost. Why? Because lower interest rates make it cheaper for companies to borrow money, which can lead to higher profits and, you guessed it, higher stock prices. Plus, when interest rates are low, investors often move money out of safer investments like bonds and into the stock market, hoping for higher returns. This influx of cash can further drive up stock prices. But hold on a minute before you go all in on stocks. Remember, the stock market is notoriously unpredictable. Just because the Fed cuts rates doesn't mean the market is guaranteed to go up. There are a million other factors that can affect stock prices, from economic data to geopolitical events to plain old investor sentiment. Section 5, finding the right balance, your investment strategy. So we've covered a lot of ground here, folks. We've talked about savings accounts, CDs, bonds, and the stock market. Now you might be wondering, Jim, what's the best way to invest my money in a falling rate environment? Well, there's no one-size-fits-all answer, my friend. The best investment strategy for you will depend on your individual circumstances, risk tolerance, and financial goals. But here's the golden rule. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Diversification is key. That means spreading your money across different asset classes, stocks, bonds, cash, to reduce your overall risk. If one investment takes a hit, the others can help cushion the blow. And don't be afraid to seek professional advice if you're feeling lost in the investment wilderness. A good financial advisor can help you create a personalized investment plan that aligns with your goals and helps you navigate the ups and downs of the market. Remember, investing is a marathon, not a sprint. So buckle up, stay informed, and don't be afraid to adjust your strategy as the economic landscape changes. The Fed's Employment Balancing Act. Let's talk about jobs. The job market is a major factor the Fed considers for interest rates. The Fed has a dual mandate: keep inflation in check and promote maximum employment. Maximum employment means most people who want to work can find a job. We've seen signs of slowing job growth. The Fed cut rates to encourage businesses to hire more workers. Lower rates can boost consumer confidence and spending, leading to more hiring. Section 2, Wage Watch. Will your paycheck get a boost? Now let's talk about something near and dear to all of our hearts: wages. When the job market is strong and unemployment is low, employers often have to offer higher wages to attract and retain skilled workers. It's all about supply and demand, folks. When the supply of workers is low and the demand is high, wages tend to go up. So will this rate cut lead to bigger paychecks for you and your family? Well, it's not a guarantee, but it's possible. If the rate cut does its job and stimulates the economy, we could see the job market heat up, which could put upward pressure on wages. Of course, there are a lot of other factors that influence wages, such as productivity, inflation, and the overall health of the economy. But a strong job market is certainly a step in the right direction. So keep your fingers crossed and keep an eye on those job postings. All right, let's talk about something economists call consumer confidence. It sounds fancy, but it's really just a measure of how optimistic people feel about the economy. When people are feeling good about the future, they tend to spend more money. And when consumers spend more, businesses make more money and the economy grows. It's a beautiful thing. Now, consumer confidence can be a bit fickle. It can be influenced by all sorts of things, from gas prices to the stock market to political events. But here's the thing: rate cuts can sometimes give consumer confidence a little boost. Why? Because when the Fed cuts rates, it's often seen as a sign that they're trying to support the economy. And when people feel like the economy is in good hands, they're more likely to open their wallets and spend. Now, let's step back and look at the big picture for a minute. The Fed's ultimate goal with this rate cut and all their other policies is to promote economic growth and stability. They want the economy to be the little engine that could, chugging along at a healthy pace without derailing. Economic growth is essential for a thriving society. It leads to job creation, higher wages, and a better standard of living for everyone. But growth that's too fast can be dangerous too. It can lead to inflation, asset bubbles, and unsustainable booms and busts. That's why the Fed is always trying to strike a balance, keeping the economy growing at a sustainable pace without letting things overheat. It's a delicate dance, folks, and they don't always get it right. So we've talked about the Fed's two main goals: maximum employment and stable prices, aka keeping inflation in check. Now here's the tricky part. Sometimes these two goals can be at odds with each other. When the economy is growing too quickly, inflation can start to rear its ugly head. That's because when demand for goods and services outstrips supply, prices tend to rise. To combat inflation, the Fed might raise interest rates, which can slow down economic growth. But when the economy is sluggish, the Fed might lower interest rates to try to stimulate growth, even if it means risking a little bit of inflation. It's a constant balancing act, folks, and the Fed is always walking a tightrope, trying to find that sweet spot where the economy can grow without prices spiraling out of control. All right, folks, let's talk about spending. You know that thing you do with your hard-earned money when you buy groceries, fill up your gas tank, or treat yourself to a night out? The Fed's rate cut is designed to put you in a spending mood. Lower rates make borrowing cheaper. That means more loans for cars or homes. Lower rates can make you feel richer, more willing to spend. All that spending adds up and boosts the economy. It's like a chain reaction, folks. Now here's the flip side of the spending coin: inflation. When the economy heats up and people start spending more freely, prices can start to rise. Remember, it's all about supply and demand. When demand for goods and services outpaces supply, businesses can raise prices, and that, my friends, is inflation. Now, a little bit of inflation is normal and even healthy for a growing economy, but too much inflation can be a real buzzkill. It erodes your purchasing power, meaning your hard-earned dollars don't stretch as far as they used to. Suddenly, that gallon of milk that used to cost $3.50 is now $4, and that vacation you were saving for just got a whole lot more expensive. The Fed knows this, and they're keeping a close eye on inflation. They've said they're aiming for an inflation rate of around 2%, which they consider to be a healthy level. This recent rate cut is a calculated risk. They're hoping it'll spur economic growth without sending inflation spiraling out of control. Let's talk about the housing market. Remember the early 2000s housing bubble and crash? Not fun times. The Fed is trying to avoid a repeat. Lower interest rates can boost demand and prices. Good for sellers, tough for first-time buyers. If rates stay low, prices may outpace wages. More debt can lead to trouble. The Fed is walking a tightrope. They want to support the market without inflating another bubble. The Fed's crystal ball predicting consumer behavior. Now, you might be thinking, Jim, the Fed can't control how people spend their money. They're not mind readers. And you're right, folks. The Fed doesn't have a crystal ball. They can't predict with 100% certainty how consumers will react to this rate cut. But they're not flying blind either. The Fed has a whole army of economists who spend their days analyzing data, crunching numbers, and trying to understand how consumers behave. They look at things like consumer confidence surveys, retail sales figures, and credit card debt levels to get a sense of whether people are feeling optimistic or cautious about the economy. They also study historical trends to see how consumers have responded to rate cuts in the past. Based on all this information, they make educated guesses about how this rate cut might ripple through the economy. It's an imperfect science, but it's the best tool they've got. The balancing act continues navigating the economic tightrope. So there you have it, folks. The Fed's rate cut is a gamble, a calculated risk designed to boost the economy without letting inflation get out of control. It's a delicate balancing act, and only time will tell if they've struck the right balance. One thing's for sure, the economy is a complex beast, and there are a million moving parts that can impact its direction. The Fed can't control everything, but they're doing their best to steer the ship in the right direction. So buckle up, folks. The ride might get a little bumpy, but if the Fed plays its cards right, we could be in for a period of sustained economic growth. And hey, who doesn't like a little growth spurt every now and then? Small business, big impact, the little guys. Take the stage. Let's talk about the backbone of the American economy, small businesses. The mom and pop shops, startups, and local restaurants that give our communities their unique flavor. These businesses are the heart and soul of our economy. When the Fed cuts interest rates, it can be a real shot in the arm for small businesses. Lower rates make it cheaper to borrow money, a game changer for growth. Imagine expanding operations or hiring more staff. Big moves take capital, cold, hard cash. Even successful businesses need a little help from the bank. That's where the Fed's rate cut comes in. Lower monthly payments mean more breathing room to invest and grow. Section 2. Access to capital. Unlocking the doors of opportunity. Now, access to capital is like oxygen for small businesses. Without it, they can't survive, let alone thrive. And unfortunately, small businesses often face more challenges getting loans than their larger counterparts. Banks can be wary of lending to smaller, less established businesses, especially in uncertain economic times. But here's where the Fed's rate cut can make a real difference. When the Fed lowers rates, it sends a signal to banks that it's time to loosen the purse strings a bit. Suddenly, those small business loans don't seem so risky, and banks are more willing to take a chance on the little guys. This increased access to capital can be a game changer for small businesses, allowing them to invest in growth, hire more workers, and contribute even more to their local economies. It's a ripple effect, folks, and it all starts with that little rate cut from the Fed. Section 3. Hiring spree or cautious optimism, the job creation question. Now, one of the big questions on everyone's mind is whether this rate cut will lead to a surge in hiring. After all, small businesses are the engine of job creation in America, accounting for a huge chunk of new jobs created each year. So will we see a hiring spree in the coming months? Well, it's too early to tell for sure, but there's reason for cautious optimism. As we've discussed, lower interest rates can give small businesses more financial breathing room, making them more likely to expand and hire. Plus, if consumer confidence gets a boost from the rate cut and people start spending more, businesses will need to hire more workers to keep up with demand. However, it's important to remember that small businesses are often cautious when it comes to hiring. They want to be sure that any uptick in demand is sustainable before they bring on new employees. They've got to make sure they can keep those paychecks coming. Section 4, Main Street versus Wall Street, who benefits most? Now, whenever the Fed makes a move, there's always a debate about who benefits most, Main Street or Wall Street. Main Street, of course, represents small businesses and the average American, while Wall Street conjures up images of big corporations and wealthy investors. So, does this rate cut favor one over the other? Well, it's a bit more nuanced than that. On the surface, it might seem like Wall Street reaps the biggest rewards from rate cuts. After all, lower rates tend to boost the stock market, which benefits investors, many of whom are concentrated in that financial hub. But here's the thing. A healthy stock market is good for everyone, at least indirectly. When the market is up, people feel more confident about the economy, which can lead to more spending, which can then trickle down to Main Street in the form of increased business for small businesses. Section 5, Local Economies, feeling the ripple effect. Now let's zoom in even closer and talk about local economies. Remember those ripples we talked about earlier, the ones that spread out from the Fed's rate cut? Well, those ripples eventually reach the shores of your town, your city, your neighborhood. When small businesses in your community have access to capital and are feeling optimistic about the future, they're more likely to invest in their businesses and hire locally. That means more jobs for your friends and neighbors, more money circulating within your community, and a stronger local economy overall. It's a virtuous cycle that can have a real impact on your quality of life. Suddenly, there are more options for dining and shopping in your neighborhood, more local events and activities, and a greater sense of community pride. So the next time you hear about the Fed cutting interest rates, don't just think about it in the abstract. Think about how it might impact the small businesses in your community, the jobs they create, and the overall health of your local economy. Because, folks, when Main Street thrives, America thrives. Section 1, the bottom line, your money, your future. There you have it, folks. We've covered a lot of ground, from mortgages and car loans to the stock market and the job market. The Fed's rate cut is a big deal, no doubt about it. It's a sign that they're paying attention to what's happening in the economy, and they're willing to take action to keep things moving in the right direction. But remember, the economy is a complex beast, and there are no guarantees. This rate cut is a calculated risk, a gamble that the Fed hopes will pay off in the form of sustained economic growth. Now, I know some of you might be feeling a little overwhelmed by all this financial jargon. You might be thinking, Jim, what does this all mean for me? What should I do with my money? Well, here's the bottom line. Knowledge is power. The more you understand about how the economy works, the better equipped you'll be to make smart financial decisions for yourself and your family. Section 2. Stay informed, stay invested, the road ahead. The Fed will be watching economic data closely, looking for signs that their rate cut is working. If the economy picks up, businesses hiring, consumers spending, and inflation stays in check, they might hold off on cutting rates again. But if the job market weakens, or consumer confidence drops, or inflation rises, they might cut rates again. Stay informed about the economy and how it affects your finances. Read the business section, watch financial news channels, and ask questions if you don't understand something. Most importantly, stay invested. Not just in the stock market, but in yourself, your education, your career, and your community. The economy is about people, about all of us working together for a brighter future. So stay informed, stay invested, and let's make some money. Don't miss the bus and subscribe.